Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jake Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Dr. Marie Swingle, I wonder where she's coming in from. I wonder if she's in Canada, or what country is she traveling in now?
Well, listen for the accent. See, does she have the Swedish accent going today?
Does it change by location? I am back in Canada until I go to California for somebody's birthday party.
Arte. Arte.
So hello, gentlemen who do not want to be called gentlemen.
That's not my pronoun. My pronoun is D-bag.
Oh my. Okay.
That's so harsh for Canada. I'm sorry. In Chicago, that's a compliment.
Oh, I don't even know what it means. You have to educate this Canadian girl.
Oh, all right. Never mind. We'll edit that out. So the Q&A yesterday, somebody brilliant brought up lead gasoline, and I know Jay's advocation. How do you say that, Jay? What's your
avocation? Your vocation or your avocation? Your vocation, you're doing it for money. Your avocation, you're doing it as a hobby or for fun, or not for pay. Environmental stuff has been my avocation for a long, long time, and quite effectively. Much to the chagrin of the oil companies and others. But they've ponied up when they had to, when they were forced to, and the little town of 3,000 people got $30 million. So and the plant. The plant that was put there is quiet. You can't hear it when you walk past it, and it's tucked back into an industrial area. It's not right across the street from the Victorians like it was going to be, and totally re-engineered it.
But
the
Jay,
world's largest dry cooling system in the world was built so that it didn't have steam plumes in the vision of the town. Anyway, it was quite a re-engineering.
Well, kudos to you, Jay. This whole notion that you can just free poison everybody, we got to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
But dealing with mental health, I thought that was quite interesting. That I never put two and two together because I went to state school, but lead gasoline, all that stuff floating around, and what lead does to the mental health, I figure we could kill two birds with one stone, at least at the beginning of the podcast, and talking about how lead affects things. Flint, Michigan, too, right?
One of the good things is that the primary sources of lead in our environment in paint and in gasoline are things of the past, really. So,
well, yes and no, depending on the age of the building you're living in. There are still many older buildings that have original paint, primarily around windows and windowsills when kids hang out. That was a major issue when kids were eating paint chips. And a lot of buildings is kind of like asbestos. It's like 3 layers down. So you've got all this new great paint. But if you're thinking of renovating a place, you want to be really, really careful. And Jay, what would you say? Any building up into the 1970s, we still had lead paint. No, maybe even later, 80s, 90s. When was lead paint banned?
It was out of paint that they could make before it was out of paint that was available at the store. They let them sell off their stock as opposed to pulling it. And that's economically kind of what you do. You don't want to kill a business. So, but the acute exposure from lead in gasoline also is still in soil. If you look on the soil next to and under freeways and overpasses and things such as that. Lead doesn't travel without acidity.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we might as well throw in another one. Anybody who lives by a major thoroughfare, be it a bridge or a highway, you have all those microplastics coming up from the tires as well.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things to look at developmentally. I mean, as we get older, well, it's not that we're more resilient. Our bodies aren't growing in any way. They're actually ungrowing, shall we say. But you have to be really cautious of all this stuff. Really cautious.
In the wars, they needed a lot of lead, and the lead came from smelters, and one of the world's largest was right next to Crockett, the town that I used to live in, and it had the world's tallest smokestack. In an attempt to diffuse the toxicity from the top of a very tall stack, and and they produce gold, they produce all sorts of things, but lots and lots and lots of lead. And the about a mile away, as the crow flies, direct from the top of that stack, are hills across the water. And those hillsides, if you took your horse over there and grazed them on the grass on the hillsides, there was a 100% fatality rate with 30 days of grazing. So the pollution was really quite intense. Now, all of that area is now homes. There was a landfill over there that ended up getting bulldozed over, and there's homes on top of that as well. So there's a lot of places that have been built up that are questionable decision making for planners. But we just stopped one in Richmond. AstraZeneca has a large site. They were going to put 4,000 folks on a large chunk of land, multi-family units, and the land has been elevated. They brought in fill to cover it, so that it's above what sea level rise would be, but the groundwater problem is still an issue for that. Anyway, the toxicity underneath that would produce TCE, and TCE is Parkinsonism, and the as the decision for developing it came closer and closer, we actually got experts from UC Berkeley to come and take a look at the groundwater elevation, bringing that toxic waste up into contact with folks. And the developer had initially said that the ground floor would only be parking, there wouldn't be any livable space on the ground floor, but their designs evolved over time, and now it's Anyway, the planning committee there basically decided that they needed to set that aside and restudy it because of how much potential problems there were being raised by the local citizens. So
I was hoping to get some bad art from you, Jay, because part of the reason lead is so bad, I'm getting ahead of my skis here, but doesn't it erode the myelin sheath?
Lead ends up
Getting better
reducing
with pronunciation there, Pete.
lead reduces the IQ points fairly dramatically, and when you look at it, there's an increase in delta in the EEG, which is something that's seen in learning disabilities, but it reflects white matter change. And you probably have had negative impact on myelin sheath due to the lead. But the lead ends up being stored long term in your bones, and it's unfortunately occasionally that when they try to bring it out to clean somebody from lead exposure, chelation, can reactivate the lead and put it back into bioavailability. So some people have really difficult reactions to the to being cleaned out.
Well, your bones thinks it's calcium, right, or whatever. It mask it as such.
You think you're some Marvel character that's going to have some metal things come shooting out or something, you know?
I don't know. I
So,
tripped over a YouTube video, and part of it was they use lead to figure out how old the Earth is. So it's 4.5 billion years, and the half-life of lead or whatever it is. You have to go through different levels of the soil, like you were saying, to get down to what the real Earth is, to get away from the contamination. And I'm just asking you guys, off the back of an envelope, when autism and all this stuff, not saying it's all because of it, but the gasoline in the cars, I mean, they put it in there to get more oomph out of the pistons. So from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you got 30, 40 years in there where we've been sucking on this stuff.
Well,
And
let's just say metals in the body, with the exception of, iron, I would say. Well, careful. It all depends on the degree. We do need metals.
moderation.
Yeah, moderation in
yeah.
terms of how much iron you eat. Yeah. No, I mean, there's certain things that we need for body homeostasis. Okay. But in terms of what we're doing in our environment, we just have extreme overexposure and processing of many of the things that humans have used in their advancement and their development. And we have these regions with pools, mining communities, paper mills, just all kinds of, various forms of factories, as smelters, et cetera, as Jay was saying, so it's kind of all over. Good news is we've learned about it. Bad news is it's still around and very, very active and easy to consume. I mean, the whole autism flare, in terms of, I'm not going to get into the politics, but one of the things we do know is there's definitely a contribution of some form of toxicity at a cellular level.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's just not debatable. Source of that, we can go round and round in circles, but we're definitely dealing with some form of toxicity. Jay mentioned Parkinson's. I mean, we're just learning so much about this. And essentially we're poisoning ourselves through our development. And we just have to wisen up as human beings, and figure out ways to advance ourselves while still protecting ourselves. And this is, where the lobbying and the profiteering and all that comes in. So again, kudos to Jay. And then also, kudos a bit to our field in terms of what we're trying to do when, unfortunately, people are influenced by this in terms of lessening it. But Jay was, mentioning Delta. If you have a little munchkin with high delta, if you bring down the delta, they go off skipping into the sunset and can learn better. Now, if that delta is from lead poisoning, that's a totally different entity. So
you train that?
Yes and no, right?
Depends.
Yeah.
You
I mean, Jay can
you
probably
can
tell.
try. There's
Yeah.
no evidence that it does or doesn't end up making a difference.
I
But you can try, that's for sure.
I think we recruit different things in the training, if that makes more sense. I mean, Jay was talking about the other day that I think it was Jay, maybe it wasn't Jay. No, I think it was Ron Swatzyna. Was talking about, when you see a brain with this huge anomaly post head injury, be really, really careful about fixing that anomaly. Any of us that work with concussion know that sometimes the anomaly is the repair. So you have to be really, really cautious. So all this tells us is, and we all know the brain is an extremely intelligent instrument. It finds other ways. My little theory here is, sure, we try and train the delta, but we're recruiting other things so that the child does benefit from the therapy. There are also other things that we can do. Good old theta SMR. Sure, we're not attacking the delta, but we can sharpen up the child in other ways. Bringing down theta, etc. So it's not an absolute doomsday. But it's really, really, really slow. And you're going to hit some walls.
Is it like a rich club hub when you get a thud to the head, Jay? Can you deteriorate it, or it's just all over you?
Rich club hubs are in the connectivity where spokes all converge to an important spot, and some of the very important spots that have a lot of connectivity are referred to as rich club hubs. And there we go.
But the lead
100 pounds.
poisoning, it's not going to settle. It's going to be all.
It's not localized unless you've put it in with a nail,
Yeah. Okay.
So
A rusty
um,
nail.
but the damage is essentially connectivity damage with white matter. So, and it's not easily reversible. The IQ on kids that have lost 10, 20 IQ points because of some minor lead exposure, that's considered fairly uh, common in the cities that have had lead in the pipes. Yeah, the Upper Midwest is not just one city that's famous for it. There's a lot of cities that have it as an issue. In fact, I think the Oakland school system here in the Bay Area just got a bid for refitting their schools with pipes that have no lead. And it was a $50 million fee to end up having the schools all replumbed. So it's not an inconsequential thing, but it is the right thing to do. What are you going to do? Have no water for the kids in the school? So you like plants, you got to feed and water them. So
Well, to Jay's
yeah.
point, it's kind of everywhere. That's the issue. And I'm going to be doomy and gloomy, drinking all this bottled water, then you're just infecting yourself with plastics, right? So, I mean, we really have to wisen up.
What do the
Okay.
microplastics do then?
We don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We joke, but it's everywhere. It's in our
Yeah.
pants, it's in our
Yeah.
bottles. And, learn as we go. But I think there's some things that we are aware of, and I'm really pleased that we're getting on it. And again, the plastics, we thought we were doing wonderful things with this.
Look
Da 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 da.
look
30 years later.
carefully at the water quality reports for the water you're drinking from the community you're in.
Mhm.
Those reports are public records, and if you actually look at them, you'll find quite often that they're federal standards being violated, and sometimes in a rather consistent pattern. Fairfield and Sassoon, where I live now, the water supply comes from Lake Berryessa, and Lake Berryessa is reasonably good water. It tastes fine, all of that. However, there's a small amount of biological material in it that interact with the chlorine, producing chloroform.
Mhm.
And well, chloroform is a class of chemicals related to chloroform, and those are not good for you. If you drink the water here and you have certain health problems, it's more acutely a problem, but it's a problem for chronic exposure. So you can shower in it, but um, so we're having a fancy filter and reverse osmosis system put into the house, so I don't have to drink out of bottles. But you can't drink the water here.
Yeah.
It's
So, well, you
everywhere, though.
can't.
I mean, one
You
is,
can, but my system's so screwed up. You know.
Jay's
Uh,
so special. Yeah. But it's, one
well,
of the things Jay was
this is
talking
what
about.
death looks like on lots of drugs. So,
I was going
Missing.
to interject there, though, that, we're talking about source of water, which Jay was talking about, and then there's transport of water, right? In terms of what it goes through. This is where the lead pipes go in, et cetera. But I mean, we might be getting off topic, but a key thing is make sure, like first thing in the morning, run your water a little bit. Like don't drink that water that's been sitting in the pipes, overnight, or those type of things.
What about a garden hose?
Yeah,
It
well,
tastes so
plastic
good.
versus lead, you know. Hey,
Don't
you know,
you remember
chlorine
drinking
versus mustard, you
Garden
know.
hose water has its own taste, you
Oh
know?
yeah,
Don't we all remember that? Yeah.
That rubbery, plasticky, mmm.
Hot.
that tadpole taste. We're talking about drugs or things that we can't control, stuff that we can control. Like how bad is sugar for kids?
Yeah, it
What does it
depends
do to
upon
mental
how
health?
it depends upon how much they consume. As a small condiment, it has very little negative effect. But if you start to jack up the amount of it, you can goof up your glucose metabolism by overriding a reasonable amount of input to it. And if you start to end up having glucose metabolism problems, you can end up having hypoglycemia, where when you take in the sugar, because your body expects there's going to be a lot of it, it start to burn it off really fast, and so your blood sugar shoots up and with the input, and then it collapses because of the metabolism. So you
But
end up
doesn't the
with
brain
low
work on
levels.
glucose? So I was wondering what's happening with the brain.
Well, the brain works on glucose and also ketones. And ketones provide about 40% of your metabolism. And that's based on lipids. It's not based on sugars or carbohydrates. So that in seniors, for instance, you start to become insulin resistant. The brain becomes less responsive to insulin, and your brain metabolism drops. Now, if you're not using ketones because your diet sucks, and at that point you don't actually have enough triglycerides and free fatty acids and stuff in your diet, you're going to end up having no ketones either. And if you add coconut oil on top of your oatmeal or something, that kind of an addition into your diet can end up recovering cognitive function in seniors. It's surprising. I've seen, the draw a clock test, where the clock they drew is showed to somebody. They wouldn't even guess that somebody was trying to draw a clock. Most of them you can kind of halfway think, well, there's a circle and there's some numbers and arrows. Somebody was deconstructing a clock, but this was totally derubricized. There wasn't any categorizable pattern. It was just chaos. And a few weeks later, again with the addition of the coconut oil into the diet, the ketones basically fired up into the brain. You get a clock with a stem winder and everything in place. So the recovery of function metabolically is important, and a lot of people don't really look that carefully at the diet. And if you're a senior and you're cooking for yourself, it's not that exciting to cook for one person, and you get stuck in a rut and you're not really eating a balanced diet. That you can hurt yourself quickly with poor diet.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm going to take this down a little bit for the layperson. What thank you, Jay, started to do. Yeah, it's all about balance, whether we're talking about seniors or kids, and it's always about I would say, secret source. I mean, oranges, grapes, bananas. I mean, all these wonderful high sugars, honey, maple syrup, et cetera, et cetera. But the key is when we just get these pure corn and sugar cane in volume and consistency. So the majority of processed and packaged foods are just loaded with it. But as Jay
Starbucks.
was saying, they don't have the balance of other components in it so that the metabolism functions well. There's nothing wrong with a piece of chocolate cake, maybe even a piece of chocolate cake a day, as long as you get the other things that balance it out. So, I mean, Jay again mentioned coconut oil. Yay, everybody eat coconut. Big fat coconut oil saves everything. No,
Be
it helps
close to a bathroom.
Yeah, that's true. But it helps to balance things out. And I think in terms of our food systems, again, we've lost the balance. It's as simple as that. It need not be so complicated.
Cake sounds like eggs and
Yeah.
flour and baking soda and stuff. I mean,
Love,
the cake
love.
sounds like it's good stuff, Uh,
And a little bit of sugar, but
yeah,
kids have no, majority of children, let me rephrase, have no control mechanism over sugar, right? I mean, we're
yeah,
wired to consume for energy, okay? And
yeah.
elders kind of stop caring, as Jay said. Hey, Jay, is this one of the reasons why elders love sucking on hard candy after a
Uh,
certain age?
I'm just wondering
I,
about those kids that are hopping out of their parents' car doing the Starbucks run before they go to school. So they get hit with that big thing of sugar and caffeine and no sleep and they go to school. I'm just wondering how that's a recipe for learning.
Do we have to even respond to that? Like ding ding ding
caffeine
ding ding.
crudely like doing a Ritalin in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, of course you go in, there's nothing in your tummy. And
Yeah.
you're wired and then you just crash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Moderation again. If you look at certain cultures, France, for example, it's not uncommon for very young children to have a little bit of cafe au lait, right? I mean, they have 3 drops of coffee in their warm milk in the morning, and they're kind of mimicking their parents. They're not really drinking coffee, right?
No, it's wine.
Well, I mean, ironically, the same thing. You have tinted wine, right? A
Yeah.
couple of drops of wine, so the children habituate. North Americans, it's kind of all or nothing, right?
Well, they teach you how to drink in Europe. Here, you got to figure it out yourself. It's like
Well, it's
sex
it's just
education.
it's gradual exposure, right? It makes a whole lot of sense. Now, please, we can't go the other extreme and put, Europe on a pedestal. I mean, there's a major drinking binging issue in youth as well, Doug. I mean, don't get me wrong, it exists, okay, but you don't have the degree of
England and Ireland don't count.
yeah, that's true. I think you're drunk coming out of
Nor
the
nor
womb
do
in Europe.
tourists in Amsterdam. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
so
the locals do not behave like the tourists in Amsterdam. They just
yeah.
don't.
Actually, they're trying to cut back on uh, the uh, the chaos in Amsterdam and trying to make it more family friendly. So restricting who can go into the coffee shops.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if
Vegas
you're
did.
local,
Hey,
if
why
you're
don't we
local,
go?
you can. If
Yeah,
you're out of towner, you're somewhat restricted. Anyway, they're trying to solve their problem with it's no balance. So
good segue. Can we talk about myelination and marijuana and why individuals under 26 should not touch the stuff? Jay, you want to pick that up?
well, it it's on an individual basis. The impact on the brain can end up being really in the acute phase, a slowing of the alpha. So if you have slow alpha in the first place and it's slowed further, that can be problematic, quite problematic. If you have very, very fast alpha and it slows it, you're normalized by that.
Yeah.
But that's the acute effect. And the acute effect is basically just how you feel when you're stoned acutely. But what about the third, fourth, fifth day of doing it? What's happening? Since it's fat soluble, your body is storing it, and it's stored in fat, including myelin. And one of the things that's observed is that over time, the coherence, the hyperconnectivity of the frontal lobe, the the frontal lobe is important for function. It does attentional and affective and motor regulation. So it should be busy even when you close your eyes and idle the back of your head in the vision area, the front of your brain shouldn't be going on vacation. It should still be busy, ready to call back the workers when you open your eyes again. But the frontal lobe has all of that function to do, and if it's impaired with hypercoherence, the the network connectivity dynamics has to be gone. Hypercoherence is a connectivity that's stuck. Your coherence is roughly connectivity, and the dynamic functional frontal lobe will connect, disconnect, and reconnect with a different assembly to do different functions. So you're flip-flopping between different networks dynamically. If it's dynamic, if it loses that dynamic, the coherence goes up and up and up. So hypercoherence, which is seen with chronic THC use. Now, you can't believe half of the studies that are out there on THC, because some of them were done for the purpose of promoting, and some were done for the purpose of denying. You have to look for people that have done good science. Struve, Struve, Dr. Struve, did very good work. He recruited professional subjects that were naive to pot. So these weren't people that had self-selected through the running into it on the street. They didn't have comorbidities with other drug things and so forth. So, and he basically got them very high quality pot and got them chronically exposed across time, and observed the effect on the EEG, and did a really well done study. So his work is, I think, really quite credible.
Dave, what was the age of these folks?
The age ends up being from teens through young adults, people that could be recruited professionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They weren't looking for people my age, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, again, my concern, it sounds funny, when you're a little bit older, development is more, fixed, and you just get a little bit slower, right? As you said, you can't flip flop as much. But my concern is
development keeps going. The older the brain, the more complexity there is. Even when alpha starts to slow, even as we get older and alpha starts to slow, the complexity of the EEG continues to increase. So wisdom is probably associated with complexity. So
can I rephrase that to setup? Okay. Yeah, so in terms of a lot of the setup, and in particular, I'm concerned about the developmental of the frontal lobes and emotionality, right? And as Jay was saying, when I hound that home, yeah, there are individuals that are in a certain class where, THC doesn't affect them the way it does other folks, and you don't know which class you're in. So this is where I really put a cry out to youth. This is not really the time to experiment. And again, people are free to disagree with me. But I don't know. I mean, the marijuana that's out there now is not your grandparents, or for that matter, your parents' marijuana. The strength of it is astronomical. So
why does it affect some people? They get anxious, and some people chill.
So if you have hypercoherent alpha up front already, and you make it more hypercoherent, the affective regulation, which anxiety isn't exactly well-regulated affect, so it can enhance that. The slowing of the alpha isn't going to be the problem for the anxiety, but the increase in coherence is going to be an issue.
It essentially magnifies states and traits. Is that a good way to put it, Jay? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why does it make you hungry?
Hormones.
Why does it make you like Doritos?
That's only because you've been watching commercials, So
Taco Bell.
No, it plays with hormones.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the reason you can get those good old munchies. Yeah.
So is that the cravings, our old anterior cingulate, or what?
Maybe.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
On an individual basis, you can end up seeing some people get really munchies. I mean, they will eat anything. Uh, you open the refrigerator and you think, well, nobody's cleaned this in a week or so, and the munchies hit and that thing is cleaned out. So, yeah, even judgment is gone at that point. So.
And then it was brought up on the Q&A yesterday. And if there's any, if you want to close on anything that piqued your interest on the Q&A we did yesterday, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central Time, please check with your primary care physician first for informational and entertainment purposes only. They said if you have a choice between weed or psilocybin or LSD, weed is still the best go-to if you have to.
I'm not going there.
There's that's a false choice. There's also none of the above.
None of the above.
As a choice. On an individual basis, THC may be a very bad choice. On an individual choice on basis, if your EEG has epileptiform content in it, and you take hallucinogen, and any of them have stimulating properties to them, some of them more than others, and they can potentiate discharges. So the prediction of negative outcome when taking hallucinogens, DMT, ketamine, psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, down the line. Ayahuasca is just DMT from a plant derivative. Mixture of plant derivative, but any and all of those basically end up having potential to have problems with epileptiform content in the EEG, and 5% of the general population, when you just survey everybody, you get 5% of the general population that have epileptiform content. But when you look at ADD, it's about a third. If you look at autism, it's up to 70%. So not all of these people end up having a safe choice of just try it. My friend next to me, it was fine for him. Well, he's not the one that had epileptiform content. Spindling excess beta greater than 20 microvolts is also a predictor. Ron Swatzyna did a nice study looking at medication prediction in psychiatry and what EEG factors predicted medication failure in psychiatry. The top two: epileptiform content that's unexpected, the person not having seizures, so you don't expect seeing epileptiform content, or spindling excess beta greater than 20 microvolts. And those two things were the strongest predictor of medication failure. So it's not just hallucinogens, it's meds in general that are going to be difficult when you have that kind of activity. The thing is, if you don't expect the discharges in the EEG, you're not going to predict the right class of meds even. Oh, he's acting crazy. He's psychotic. We have to give him an antipsychotic. Well, if it's a temporal lobe seizure discharge that's causing the rage event that you think is crazy, or he's hearing voices because of a discharge, at that point, an anticonvulsant is the fix. An antipsychotic will make him worse. So you got to look at the EEG.
But Jay and Dr. Marie, I thought we're in the neuroplasticity business. Doesn't LSD make new pathways?
It can.
And it smashes old ones, so
it can enhance connectivity, and there's times that excess connectivity is a problem. So you've got to watch out what you're doing. I would suggest that uh, if you're considering hallucinogen as a therapeutic thing, it's different than if you're considering it as a lifestyle hack microdose thing.
Mhm.
So those are two different pathways. If you're
I'm just
doing
gonna.
the therapeutic pathway, you probably find a therapist who's going to end up setting some intentionality, trying to come up with a proper set, maybe what kind of music. I mean, all of that is going to be part of the interaction before
The journey.
the ketamine or whatever is going to be administered. So there's others that are just mills where you go in, you get your ketamine and they cover you with a weighted blanket, and later
Yeah, the
you,
popularity of this new therapy, I think, is very, very problematic. As Jay was saying, if you have any of, those two conditions, the spindling of beta or any, hidden or unexpressed eleptiform, meaning you don't have seizures in whatever form. The other is if schizophrenia runs in your family, even extremely distantly, and a lot of people aren't connected enough to their families to know that their third cousin or great great grandmother or grandfather. So, I mean, these things really can have potentially dangerous effects. Yes, I'm the conservative on this show, and this is my moment to kind of say that. You really, really have to be cautious. And,
yeah.
when you're trying some of these therapies to deal with, to unblock depression, trauma, etc., is your therapist looking at your EEG before they say we're going to do medically assisted, a therapeutically assisted consumption, right? This has to be in the hands of people who really, really know what they're doing and recognize that this is still 100% experimental. This is not a game. The other thing is many of these things, once it's in your system, it can take a long time to play out. Not that I'm going, woohoo, alcohol, but alcohol you can sip slowly. Okay. When you're starting to get tipsy and you have the choice to stop. When you're right. I'm not talking about people who are going nuts and doing shots. Okay. I'm talking about quote unquote responsible drinking. Marijuana, there used to be an argument that people consumed it that way. What I am seeing nowadays is people consume marijuana the same way they consume pills, meaning a massive dose, and that's it. They don't sit around slowly pacing themselves on it. So yeah, there's the conservative voice, guys. These have effects on your brain, and many of them are unknown, and many of the ones that are known are um, not respected, if that makes any sense. If you're going to be a therapist working with this, you have to respect the substance and the power of the substance that you're wielding with your clients.
Well, we go from lead to weed. Oh, it's the same show.
Both of them will make you a little slow. How's that?
and let's talk for a moment about the weed.
Yeah.
So let's say you've found that the commercial stores prices for the eighth that you want are a little higher than you thought you needed to pay, and you
Pardon the
want,
pun.
but down the road a little ways, Joe Schmo who's has some in the back room for a cheaper price. But what what did they spray on that during the year? Is this organically grown, or did they spray this with goodness knows what the hell
It
they
could
might
be
have sprayed
anything
it
from
with?
Drano to opium. Okay.
Well, there were mites on it, so we had to spray it with some powder that we used on the rose bushes. What? So you end up with toxic flower. So the quality of what you're getting isn't necessarily um, all proper. And in California, they've just this is the time of year basically that they fly over. They see gigantic fields that are planted, sometimes on the farmer's land that doesn't even know that it's there, but also in the national forest. And they've been busy taking out crops that were not permitted properly. My son's got a spot, and they fly over and dip the wing by way of saying hello. They're permitted, So
Right.
yeah.
All right, Dr. Maurice Swingle, J. Gunkelman. We are really masters of coming up with podcasts. I'll tell you what. Conservative, progressive. We got it all here. Everybody, that's saying. Everybody have a great weekend.
Enjoy yours.
All righty, bye-bye. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.